All right, everyone, welcome. So I wanted to do something really quick here, just kind of talk about the Code of Hammurabi. So for those of you in my History 110 class, you just had on my online class, obviously, you just had a discussion board on it. And, just to remind us what we were doing, we were talking about the civilizations that were living in Mesopotamia. So let me go to my map, and then basically just in this short lecture, it's going to be very short, I just want to kind of talk about the ideas that you could have inputted into the discussion board, and for anybody else who's just watching this, just kind of understanding what is this Hammurabi Code and why it's such a cool primary source. So here we go. So this is again our map, and if you remember when we left off, we had talked about the different civilizations in Mesopotamia, and we get to about 2000, a little bit after that, 2000 BC, and we get the Babylonians. And they're going to dominate this region for several hundred years. And during this time, they're going to have several monarchs, but one particular monarch which you want to know about. And of course, his name was Hammurabi. And, there's only a couple things I really want you to know about him. One, he was a strong king, helped to, bring kind of a sense of unification in the region and all that. But more importantly, Hammurabi was also the one who created the Hammurabi's Code. And so I want to kind of go through this code with you and give you some of the highlights of, how do we learn? The whole point of Hammurabi's Code is how do we learn about the Babylonians? And instead of me giving a kind of traditional lecture talking about all these things, the idea is you read Hammurabi's Code and you learn how to interpret it. And then by reading the code, you learn about a culture. And it shows you how we use a primary source to learn about a whole group of people. So let's go to our next slide here. And here what we see is, of course, the actual Code of Hammurabi. And again, I gave you his dates. You don't need to memorize his dates. Just circa dates are fine. And what you see on it, it's called a stele. It's about almost 8 feet tall. And what you'll see on the top is two figures, actually. It's Hammurabi. And next to Hammurabi, sitting down, is a god named Shamash. And Shamash, the god, is giving Hammurabi the law code. Makes sense, right? What's a better way to give authority to a legal system than to say it's derived from a religious person, a religious figure? In this case, remember, they are polytheistic. This is before monotheism, but still it gives it a little bit more weight. And then everything you see on the bottom of the stele here, this next part down here, all of that, that's of course the actual code which we have in your primary source reader. So what do we know about the Babylonians? So I'm just going to run through a few things that hopefully you kind of sorted out when you read it and you did the discussion. And if you didn't, this is kind of what I wanted you to do. This is the thinking. So I always tell students, I don't want you just to regurgitate the code. And depending if anybody wants to look up Hammurabi's code and read it, it's easily available. Just, free online. You'll get different translations, so it might sound differently. But let's start with this. One thing we know about the Babylonians is that they were very harsh. Now, how do we know that? Well, let's read a couple of the codes here. Number one, if a man has accused another of laying a death spell upon him, but has not proved it, he shall be put to death. Here's another one. If a man has stolen goods from a temple or a house, he shall be put to death. If a man has received stolen property, he shall be put to death. If a man has stolen a child, he shall be put to death. Death, 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 death. And so that's one common thing people say is, well, we know they're harsh because there were so many penalties that involve death. Now, why so many penalties that involve death? And the obvious answer is, well, they want to deter crime. What they don't have, we want to deter crime today. We don't put everybody to death for every little thing. And the reason is we have kind of this more modern policing system and other ways to punish people, which they didn't really have back then. Another interesting side note before I go to these other kind of things we can learn about the Babylonians is that the fact that we have laws about these things, all the things you read in here, really shows us how little human nature has changed because they deal with the same type of things back then that we deal with today. So whether it's stealing or whether it's marital affairs or all these things that, class system and all this stuff's there, it's the same issues we still deal with today. Same type of stealing and killing and murdering. Human nature hasn't really changed. I always tell people values change. Human nature doesn't change much. Another thing we know from the law codes is that they were very much valued agriculture. How do we know that? Well, look how many of the law codes, if you look at it carefully, deal with things like ox and corn and all these other various things that have to do with growing crops or farmland. One of the most interesting codes that I like to use to really show how advanced they were is, if you ever look it up, it's code number 215, but look at this. I'll just read it very briefly. It says, if a surgeon has operated with a bronze lancet on a patrician for a serious injury and cured him, or has removed with a bronze lancet a cataract for a patrician and cured his eyes, he shall take 10 shekels of silver. In that one line, we know so much about the Babylonians. We know they performed cataract surgery. We know they used metal, specifically bronze. We know that they had this idea of you exchange what money for service. All of that we know about the Babylonians from one law code. Another thing we know about the Babylonians is they had a class system and they had slaves. And what I mean by a class system, if you look at some of these codes here, if you find it online or if you're following along in a packet or a book, like codes anywhere from like 195 to 199, it talks about, if you break, if one has knocked out the eye, sorry, if you have broken the limb of a patrician, his limb shall be broken. Now, patrician in this translation is an upper class person. If he has knocked out the eye of a plebeian or broken the limb of a plebeian, he shall pay 1 mina of silver. Plebeian would be a lower class. Those are Roman terms, but this particular translation I'm reading is using that. And so basically, if you do something to a higher class person, you get a more severe punishment than if you do something to a lower class person. Now, if you look at our laws today, we don't have that. It doesn't say if you make X amount of money, you get this punishment. If you have Y amount of money, you make this punishment, right? Our laws aren't written that way. Now, obviously, people objectively would say, well, if you have more money, you get better lawyers, and you have more connections and all that's true. But the law itself is not written differently for different people. In the ancient Babylonians, it was. Other things you'll find in there is like a male-dominated society and all these things. So that's what I'm hoping you pick up on when you read the Code of Hammurabi. So it's a great little primary source because if you just kind of read it as codes, it's not much. But if you read it and think, what does this tell us about the Babylonians? And you think about it from that perspective, it really gives you a lot of good understanding. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you had a kind of a good discussion board with that. And then from there, we're just going to move on to our next civilization. That's a lot of fun to talk about. And that's going to, of course, be our ancient Egyptians. All right. So that's where we're going to move on next. And hopefully all that was clear. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.